For Dr. Devi Nayak had a long track written on the elusive triangle, the quality, equity, and quantity, which has been a policy concern for decades in India. That when we expand the system, what happens to quality? That should be therefore ignore quality, should be, or if we are very much concerned about quality and which should be the mark of any education system, does that mean that we ignore diversity or the inclusion of the masses into the education system? It in itself is an example where large number of students, working scholars, working people, independent thinkers, they are also, it is catering to large number of and variety of students in various fields, from science and technologies to arts, humanities, and now we see dramatics also included, the yoga and the Indian knowledge system included. So therefore, let us, as practitioners of education, students and researchers of education, foreground today's discussion in majorly two aspects. The first is what is the educational theory which is reflected in the NEP 2020, that is all for all of us to understand, and also at the same time see that what is the theory of change which is there in the NEP 2020. Because if we look at these two aspects, the educational theory and the theory of change, which is ingrained in NEP 2020, that will enable us to understand what are the opportunities which are available for us as students, as researchers. Um, it is also whenever the fact whenever any new policy is rolled out, there is lots of opportunity in terms of doing something new, something innovative, something that we have been wanting to do. We also know that policy is not something which is there written only in one document, the policy document, but policy actually unfolds or evolves on the ground through the various implementation initiatives which are taken by the practitioners. So there is policy as text and the policy which is in action. How we understand how the the last um, one can say the point of policy implementation, the practitioners who make sense of policy, how do they make sense of policy? So if we look at the NEP 2020, there's whole discussion on technology integration, experiential learning, and building skills for the 21st century. So in that light, if we try to understand what are the various approaches, for example, in the holistic development, NEP 2020 aims to nurture not only the cognitive capacities but also the social, ethical, and emotional capacities of learners. It envisions well-rounded individuals with a diverse skill set, prepared for the challenges of the 21st century. For the experiential learning, similarly, the policy encourages learning through experience, reducing the focus on rote learning and promoting hands-on activities, projects, and internships. So one needs to reflect if these things were not part of the Indian education system earlier, or doing if they were part of the Indian education system, not ignored previously. How does one act now? How does one review and reflect on what has been the situation till now, and how should we proceed further? Uh, Vocational education starting from sixth grade, integrating practical skills and industry knowledge. So there is a renewed emphasis. Previously, also in various policies, vocational education, there were attempts to integrate vocational education into the system, in school education also, but that did not succeed much. The vocational teachers in many states who were appointed at the school level, there was a very parallel cadre, thus having a differentiation between the white collar teachers and the blue collar teachers, as was called in some of the states, and the promotional cadre was not integrated. The vocational stream was considered something secondary. Uh, am I not audible? Is there some issue?
Now you are audible, ma'am.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So I was saying that although there were vocational attempts were made previously in previous policies also to introduce vocational education, however, those attempts were not successful. So there is now a renewed emphasis on vocational education now. For the multidisciplinary and
Ma'am, we are
flexible
not
education is
audible
something.
clearly. Ma'am, we are not audible clearly.
Uh, um, so how do you do now? I think I have a good connection. Oh, just let me just. Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, we are audible.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Okay. Thank you very much. So the multidisciplinary and flexible education is another emphasis of NEP 2020, which aims to break down the rigid separations between arts and sciences. So choice of curricular subjects and extra curricular or the co-curricular activities are to be included into the academic and vocational streams. They promotes multidisciplinary institutions with flexible curricula, allowing students to choose subjects. Now, this is an opportunity for learners definitely to mix and match, choose curricula which suit their interests, their artistic needs, as well as their professional vocational interests. But at the same time, uh, it is also poses a challenge for the educational providers at various levels. How does one integrate the this kind or imbibe the system with flexibility? There is also the multiple entry exit scheme has also been brought in. We see now that the undergrad program in the fourth year is being rolled as for the research at the undergrad level is being brought in. So what are there is whole lot set of one can say transformation of the education system through transformative curricula, but at the same time it poses challenges for those working at the ground level that how to bring in these challenges. If you have a rigid system of education, if the without changing the governance structures, without changing the guidelines, how can you bring in flexibility? So people have to do a lot of trial and error, uh, try initiatives which are fit for the purpose for the time being, but are these being integrated into the system? And how are these being integrated? What kind of uh, changes in rules, guidelines does the system the governance structures need to be brought into the system. So these are some of the questions that we need to reflect on when we talk about all these flexibility related challenges. We in my one of the articles that I did with a colleague for the World University News, we discussed that the multiple entry exit system, although it sounds very interesting, very good, but in a system which is so diverse, where there are a huge number of inequalities, where people have to work to get education. For in a regular system, how does one expect a student to come back to the system after a gap of many years? So we see that people who come back to the education system, um, they may be opting for a mode like the open and distance learning, but in regular education system, in regular colleges and universities, it is hardly we see that in case of India that people come back to the system. Then the student-centric approach, which the policy talks about, the in terms of pedagogy, focusing on individual learning style and needs, um, and provided with the increased flexibility in choice of subjects. So, how does that operate at various levels of education? For example, in case of school education, now we have an integrated teacher education program, which is a similar kind of program being rolled out all through the India. However, there is still a component of 30% of flexibility of having some innovative program or the component in the curricula through the intervention. So increased emphasis on teacher education is another aspect of the NEP 2020, and we see that it being rolled out through the integrated teacher education program. However, what my observation, and please, there are many esteemed colleagues who are working in the education sector. IGNOU itself is also it also has its own integrated teacher education program. Correct me if I'm wrong. What is happening is the most of the institutions are using the very same framework of the integrated teacher education program without bringing it their institutional strengths to the program. So the if the program is in the face-to-face mode and this in the similar framework, so what is the difference between the program being run at, for example, IIT Kharagpur, or program being run at a central university, or a program being run in a state university or by a private college? So how does that differ from one institution to another institution? And I'm saying, seeing if there is any difference, the difference could be in terms of the preparedness of the faculty, but in terms of the curricular structure, the program structure, the guidelines of the syllabi, everything remains the same. That 30% component where the institution can bring in their own, the strength to the program, that is still lying unutilized, and maybe it is too early to say that the strength is not being utilized properly, that the window of 30% innovation is not being utilized properly. But are institutions prepared, or are institutions just waiting for some guideline to come and then approach the implementation of any new program or policy which is happening? So this is a huge question that we need to ask. When we were at NEPA at the time of the NEP implementation, and even before NEP implementation, and the draft NEP was out, draft 2019 was out, many civil society organizations, I was also at that time and still now leading the alumni group of a very esteemed educational institution. We held many consultations, grassroots level consultations on the draft, and the government sought responses from the public, which is a very good thing to respond back to the government. And we also saw when we read the NEP 2020 that many of the suggestions which were given at the time of the discussions on the draft NEP 2019, those were incorporated in the NEP 2020 program. So I would say that having this kind of courage to take an initiative, to give feedback to the government, to have the emphasis as we as practitioners, we feel should be there in the policy. It is a very important component. And now when it comes to the implementation aspect of it, we as researchers have a huge responsibility to look at the what is the progress which is happening, whether we are doing a research project or short project as a master's student, or if we are a PhD scholar. There are many areas all through the NEP 2020 where we can make our own little contribution in asking research questions in a certain way and trying to address those. So, uh, therefore, to have this perspective of, and I say why theory matters, is not looking at NEP 2020 not only as a policy document, but as a statement of educational vision, which is there, which is a system-wide blueprint of transformation rooted in a theory of change. And which theory of change is there, that is for each of us as a researcher to understand whether the educational theory which is there, is it something which is like Freirean pedagogy, or is it something else that as researchers and students of education, we need to look at that part. Systems theory and recognition that these structural reforms, they have to be mandated by local and contextual practice, which is also there. In terms of the theory of changes, we look at the input aspect and the processes and outcomes in the system. We see that there are many structural, regulatory, and curriculum reforms which are being brought in. For example, the concept of school complexes, accreditation, changes in the accreditation system itself, and multidisciplinarity being introduced into the higher education. So there are some input level changes which are being incorporated into the national education policy. Also, the processes, we have to now work towards having an evidence-informed implementation. Implementation has been happening, but we need to also have some kind of pathway or the framework where we see that um how far we have come and where did we start. Is it benefiting or the fulfilling the purpose for which the whole education system is? And I would say, what is the purpose of having this education system? Is it for the society, for the economic development of the nation? Is for the citizens, or is it for that the the last child, the poorest of the poor, for whom are we planning the system and the education? So these are the questions as educational researchers we need to keep asking these. As students of education, we need to keep asking those questions. Also, leadership, capacity building, and digital transformations and the community partnerships, which are also in some way the national education policy envisages to incorporate as in the processes. There's a whole lot of emphasis on the online learning, digital learning, micro credentials. But then, to what effect and how are these being programmed? That is something we need to look at. And in terms of the outcome, then improved access and equity outcomes, institutional autonomy. Is it really leading to institutional autonomy and greater systemic resilience, or something else? However, the broader question, and I'm leaving you with this here in the first component here, that can a top-down national policy guarantee the bottom-up transformation in a diverse system? Or what does the quality mean in a massified, digitally disrupted landscape of higher education or education as such? So, how would you respond to it? You, as no practitioners, as the students of education, we need to reflect on. So, keep this question with you. I'll be posing some questions, and I expect you to to carry on the dialogue amongst yourself, even after this lecture, with your colleagues, amongst your colleagues, with your teachers, amongst the researchers, groups of researchers. And so the research question again that could be useful to be taken up is NEP's theory of change. If we say, is incremental, or is it hybrid, or is it disruptive in any sense? And where does this India's educational system uh, is it where does it resist change, and where does it adapt to change? What are the aspects on which the whole education system has adapted to the change in the policy, and where is it resisting, and why? What is happening? What are the reasons for that resistance if the change is not happening? Are there some systemic issues which, or there is there something which is very philosophical, to which implementers, teachers, educationists, they are not comfortable to have it in the system. So what is happening at that level? If we look at the school education, the NEP 2020, it asked for the 100% gross enrollment ratio by 2030. And there's a whole lot of focus on foundational literacy, numeracy by 2025. We are already in 2025, and we see that the foundational literacy programs have been started, but they have not really, come in kind of full motion right now. So equity via special equity or economic zones, gender targeted funding, uh, focus or including children with disabilities and differentiated support are some of the aspects which are there in the NEP 2020. And the new governance model, for example, through school complexes. So it is said that the quality can be achieved through. So what is happening to these school complexes? It's a good question for the researchers to, you know, uh, probe. Also, in terms of the standards of school education, the school quality frameworks which are being proposed, uh, whether schools are following the quality frameworks which are proposed by the central or the federal government or by the state government. Are there existing state level initiatives to assess the school quality or quality of the education, whether at the school level or higher education? And how does that different from the what is expected by the central government or by some accreditation agencies which are being now rolled out? Also, the fact is, the bigger question is about the quality cultures. How do we see as practitioners what is quality, and how does that notion of quality culture in terms of the academics, in our assessments, in understanding our work, wherever we are, how does that uh, agree or differ from what the centralized assessment of institution for quality says in terms of the standards which are being kept? Um, for higher education, the mandate is to achieve the gross enrollment ratio of 2035. I urge all the research scholars, students here in master students education to keep looking, and if you're interested in higher education, to have an understanding of the All India Higher Education Survey, AISHE, which collects information from the higher education institutions on various aspects of enrollment, teachers' qualifications, and choice of subjects, and distribution across various groups and categories. Um, Gasification, but with focus on equity and quality. There is shift towards multidisciplinary. I've already talked about it. So what are the opportunities which are presented here in all this? The school education, in higher education, and then also in the digital integration and edtech. As I mentioned, the Shala Siddhi program, which was the government's program for the school level quality framework. Um, so these are the standardized frameworks, but they need to be contextualized and adapted at the school level for continual improvement. Then for higher education, NEPA was one of the first organizations at the time of when the NEP 2020 was announced to work on a document suggesting implementation strategies uh, um, for the policy implementation for NEP 2020. And so the document is there on the NEPA website. I again urge all the researcher students, especially to look at this document, which has chapters on the various aspects of the policy discussed, starting from early childhood care education to school education to higher education, and what kind of implementation strategies have to be put in place. So please have a look at that document. I can also share after this lecture the document with the organizers, and then that can also be floated to the larger audience. In digital integration and edtech, there are opportunities abound, but what we also keep in mind is the digital literacy and equity challenges which remain in implementation of the digital integration and edtech. So even in the issue is that of the bandwidth, access to the the sets, the devices itself, the and if we look at also from the sustainable development perspective, from the environmental concerns, and there is challenge again here. Where are we going to have that kind of the the data centers? What are the implications of having those data centers for the environment? How this bandwidth, which is being uh, affecting the access to technology also to various groups. But what are the implications of these on human health? So these are some of the aspects on which our colleagues in the science and technology departments, health, are working on. At the same time, our colleagues in the environmental sciences are concerned about this. And now the fact that even the Indian government has launched its own AI project. So what is going to happen in those terms? So any point to say here is also to point out that any opportunity which is there to innovate, to work, and when you start reflecting on it in terms of the theoretical aspects, the change which is to be brought about, the change which we are expected to work on, it also brings in several challenges. The challenges are not related only to the provision of the infrastructure in terms of funding, but in terms of the governance structures which are there, the guidelines, the rules, and how to map it for the benefit of the large number, diverse population. That is also a fact. And then consequences of these for the larger society. So these are some of the aspects that we need to look at. Um, then for the higher education, then the policy talks about targeted expansion in underserved rural aspirational districts, and having policies for admission. There is push for inclusion in STEM and professional fields via scholarships, bridging and support programs, and differentiated institutional changes. But the researchers and students, if they want to look at and understand, as one of our previous speakers were introducing us, was saying that we have not been able to achieve whatever the NEP 2020 envisaged. And is there a reason why, if the policy is talking about scholarships, but what is happening to the scholarships and who are the beneficiaries of the scholarships? Are more girls being included? Are more there are special scholarships at the higher education level, for example, for the single girl child? Are the scholarships um, uh, in terms of the number? Are more scholarships available for the science and technology subjects? If and we always know that whenever there is funding available for a particular field, the other fields get neglected. But is there a balance which is being achieved? Are there more scholarships again available? For example, research in Indian knowledge system, and how can we uh, achieve the vision of NEP 2020 by addressing through the uh, addressing these challenges by bringing in evidence through research. This is the whole point that I'm trying to make here. Then the policy also talks about teachers and faculty and teacher educators. The national professional standards for teachers has already been put in place, and which requires teachers to have the continuous professional development. Now, what could be the structure of this continuous professional development for the working teachers, whether at school education or for higher education? What could be the possible structure? Can there be one framework, and we can have a mass education program, or could it be really based on what is it that the teachers want to learn? Now we have the Swayam platform, on which a variety of courses are being rolled out, and the students, the practicing teachers, young researchers, they can even IGNOU many are open to the IGNOU students also, online education students, not only IGNOU, but many open and distance learning students can opt for those courses. So, what are what are the challenges with that? I was last month with one of these state research and educational training institutions, and they had some MOOC courses for their students in the B.Ed program that they are running. And I was told that there are discrepancies in how the test scores are even reflected, that does not match with the standards. So students are unable to use those credentials when they go for their further education after the B.Ed program, or those are not considered. So these are, of course, these are the, one can say, the key thing. Maybe it could be the challenges, but we need to be aware of the challenges, and unless these are documented challenges, so the people who are at the hem of affairs, the administrators, the people in the governance system, they make those changes based on their day-to-day routine, whatever feedback they get in their practice. But if there is a concentrated research or study which highlights these issues, these kinds of issues, and how massive this is an issue, so that there can be a broader, change be brought into the system. So that is it. So do standardization and autonomy create productive tension for improvement, or risk one dominating the other? This is the one question that we need to ask. What is the impact of multidisciplinary higher education institutions and skill pathways on deep learning and employability? Because on one hand, we are talking about skilling, but on the other hand, for example, in higher education institutions, if all the emphasis remains on skilling only, what happens to deep learning and the fundamental research in the area? So these are the questions that we need to understand and then talk about. Then let's come to the quality gaps which are there at which pose huge challenges at the school level. Dropout and repetition, it continues, especially at the secondary and higher secondary level. Teachers shortages are rampant, not only at the school level but also at the higher education level. Many rural and remote areas, we find that subject specializations are not available. For example, in many rural areas, the students are unable to opt for the science stream. So, at one point, we want to create opportunities at a larger level for all children, but the children who are studying at the school level in rural, remote areas, if they do not have access to a science or mathematics teacher, then their dream of getting into the STEM education, it is curtailed at a very early stage. So, whose loss is it? Is it only the loss for the child? I think if we look at from a larger perspective, it's loss also to the society if we are not able to provide for them. So again, we know from the feedback of our colleagues of having conducted this professional development programs also during our tenure at NIPA, that many of the CPDs they often remain tick box and are not actually transformative. So if they are being conducted um, because the someone is asking um, the uh, implementer to organize these CPDs, and it is important for the teacher to attend those CPDs for their increase for their next increment in the pay. Then the whole purpose of the professional development as such remains defeated. It is not fulfilled. So, in what ways can we have CPD which actually transforms the teaching learning situation, it adds to the professional development of the practitioner, and does not remain a tick box is a huge challenge. Then in higher education, the institutional heterogeneity is there in terms of quality. And if you look at some remote and we have talked about it in our piece on accreditation while at NIPA. Accreditation may become a compliance exercise. There is also risk of degree devaluation. Now, the whole, the institutions are being asked to go for accreditation, and only in many countries, there is a whole exercise where only the accreditation students who have studied from the accredited institutions, only those students can apply for student loan for further education. However, this is not the situation yet in India, but what is happening is that the degrees only from the accredited institutions are being given emphasis in recruitment by many of the recruiters, which is something which is happening. And now it has become important for all the higher education institutions. So the quality also varies in higher education. Um, Also, because we are a massifying system, we know that India has a demographic dividend till 2050, which means that the population from 15 to 35 years would be the largest in the whole world in India. How and if all this whole group is going to get into higher education, um, what happens if massification outpaces the quality enhancement? So quality is not improving, but increasing number of students are getting degrees. Micro credentials are they're earning micro credentials, but then to what effect if these are not adding to the quality of education? So is society going to benefit in the long run? Is the individual going to benefit in the long run from these changes? And if the whole economy also, because education is also a driver for economic growth. So who is going to benefit from this, and what are the impediments? And therefore, so there's a huge challenge here. Then equity gaps, as I mentioned about, for example, student not being able to opt for science subjects. There is underrepresentation of SEDGs, especially in STEM professional programs. There is lack of effective support, digital divide and mentoring also. And in higher education system, we know that the private sector is also expanding. And now more than, 2/3 of enrollments are, more than 50% of enrollments are there in the private sector. So, if the regulatory and support mechanisms are not robust at the federal level, at the state level, the extension of the private sector at such a huge pace, that can also lead to increased inequity in many aspects, if not quality. Then the equity component may get suffer from this situation. And then coming to the question of, and I see that, when I say foreground in educational theory and theory of change, looking at this framework from looking at it from the framework of quality, equity, and provision for the teachers, it is also very important. So what is happening at the uh, about the deployment and recruitment at the school level, at higher education level? Large number of teachers are still in contractual positions and with micro credentials, so it is also a governance issue. If you have more micro credentials and you give choice to the students to offer those micro credentials from anywhere, any institution, how does institution operate in terms of the continuity of the the faculty, and the funding for the faculty recruitment, and money for the salaries of the teachers? So, but does that mean we do not require regular teachers, and can that be done in a piecemeal way? What happens if and there are researchers in um, teachers motivation? The national education policy itself talks about highly energized and motivated teachers, but in this kind of scenario where how what could be the motivating factors for a teacher? So if we have large number of contract teachers, is it in the benefit of the students or the system in itself? Because is this kind of system sustainable? These are some of the questions that we need to ask. And also in higher education, we have varied digital readiness. Although now, and if we see at the time when the NEP was launched, okay, in 2020, immediately we faced the situation of COVID. We were in the lockdown period when the NEP was announced. Then around that time, there was whole discussion on the digital resources. MOOCs was already in place, and now there is a very disruptive technology situation that we are in, where we have the AI, which has already entered our classrooms, whether we like it or we do not like it. So, do we have policies in educational institutions which around, for example, student assessment, on assessing students' work, on having the research programs? What kind of help do we have? Orientation for our students, in what ways you can have help and still be not dependent on AI devices, tools? And how AI in itself could be is actually still in a learning stage. So it's although it's learning fast, but it's still at a learning stage. So are you committing to teaching AI to learn faster, or are students committing to learn and build their own cognitive capacities? These are some of the questions that the students need to ask. The teachers who are planning for the students, they need to bring in and the administrators at the institutional level, whether at the school level or whether at the university and college level, they need to bring in the AI policy. We had digital education, but we did not have in many university, even when NAC was had started asking for any digital education, policy for digital education and how that is operating. Then came the phase when everyone was asked to buy tools to check plagiarism. But now we have we are in a situation of another disruption. It's a huge disruption where there are AI tools with the help of which you can, even when someone is copying from AI, they can still make their work humanized, and so that it's not traceable by another AI. So what is the policy? How are we orienting our students? What are the challenges? And in the light of this whole digital transformation, this disruptive technology has come, and the institutions have to respond to it. So the agency of the faculty or the teacher and the institution has to mediate these transformations and reforms in day-to-day classroom practice, as well as through having effective institutional policies to safeguard also learners in the classroom. Then we come to the final part of it, and I'll take another 10-12 minutes for this. The strategies for effective implementation. So one aspect on which I already pointed out earlier was the is the evidence-based, context-specific, targeting of implementation. And when we say evidence-based, so who are the people who are working or towards these evidence? This is not only the institution. Of course, we need large research projects. Even big institutions, they are conducted, small scale short studies. I think the institutions need to think big, even and also incorporate the researchers who also need to be encouraged, especially those working in for their postdoctoral researches and the final stages of their PhD work, to think big in terms of having a large scale study, unless it's a very site specific ethnographies that they are doing. If they're not doing that, but wherever possible, if for the quantitative study, research questions were being asked, large-scale studies, nationwide, sector-wide, are very important to be included. Also, to identify the bottlenecks which are there. We need to also have real-time TMIs, the management of information system data. But again, the whole situation, I would say that data is useful, but for whom? That we need to. So, do we need to have centralized data, or whether institutional level, repositories of data which can be shared between institutions through a common framework? That will be helpful. So, these are some of the issues where we need to look at. Scenario-based enrollment transitional planning, which NEPA has been talking about for long. It is very important, so that we know how the population, the children entering school are transitioning through the primary to secondary to higher education across various stages. And also focus on the internal efficiency improvements, not only the enrollment and expansion. So when a child enters an educational institution at the school level, or a young person enters the higher education, how does that experience of being into the higher education transform the child in a positive way, in a fulfilling way, to make them a better learner, a better functioning person, an emotionally stable person. But is it or what that those kinds of researches are also needed, and emphasis needs to be placed on that aspect. Then the capacity at the institutional development level that we need to build through leadership academies, through institutional development plans at the institutional school level, also at the higher education level. Higher education clusters are expected to be hubs. So how do we make these higher education institutions as clusters or hubs for resource and knowledge sharing? That needs to, because uh, to be a mentor institution is a huge challenge. It means double the work. And how the institutions assess their own capacities and how they actually contribute to the other institutions in a meaningful way is a huge task for which institutions need to make the planning, and to have this whole system of accreditation funding and have a sense of public accountability. So, public accountability is something in an expanding system which is highly privatized. We need to bring in the issue or the question of public accountability back into the discourse of education and implementation. Um, then the digital, multimodal, and inclusive education, we already are making huge strides through various online education programs launched by the Gyan, Swayam, and through these the blending learning models are also being placed. Huge investments are going into digital infrastructure to close these divides. And but the continuous research capacity, that is something that needs to be built up. And equity first monitoring, I would say, needs to be put in place. I said public accountability is something which is important when we are discussing about implementing strategies for the NEP, and we want to assess how far we have come. Then what is happening to with all the changes that we are making? Are students at the end of it, the day, benefiting from these changes? Are they becoming better learners? Are they is all the changes making them feel equipped? Again, I would reiterate, for the work life, for a good emotional social life, for to become better citizens. So are they becoming equipped in that sense? Are they becoming empowered and feeling equipped and for example, becoming entrepreneur is something which is expected. And what kind of investments are being made to enable young learners to become entrepreneurs, not and the industry institution linkages. So the points of reflection and provocation, I would say, uh, at the end of this is, can the same structures deliver both the scale and depth in learning, especially in a massified higher education? So do we need to make changes into the structures? Now, when we say changes into the structure, then what happens to the human resources? And can we have a kind of, ad hocism or contractualization of the human resources while making those structural changes? This is something which is an area of concern, which the policymakers need to look at, which our learners also, the young researchers also need to look at. Um, will digital skills actually democratize or stratify educational opportunity, or whatever revolution are happening? So are we becoming better learners because of this digital revolution? What are the windows of opportunity and what are the challenges? How do we address those challenges? Then we see that there has been change in the accreditation system. Now we have come to the binary accreditation system. Can that be a lever for quality? Can we say that those institutions which are accredited are better quality institutions and those who are not are poor in quality? Or Does it risk mediocrity in the sense that for the sake of compliance, there's institutions go to the accreditor, arrange for the minimum requirements and get themselves accredited? Then there is no follow-up in terms of what goes on in the institution. So how to go beyond the checklist compliance? And can genuine faculty agency coexist with the national standardization and high stakes of external audit? There's I think the colleagues who are teaching at various institutions, this might resonate more with them, or if any of the learners here are also teachers. So if there is a standardized system, um, in that standardized system, what happens to the teacher's agency and teachers' autonomy, academic freedom of teachers? That is, these are the questions that we need to ponder upon. How inclusion and academic rigor navigated in a context of increasing credentialism and employability focus? What happens to these issues? And um, are there research models or models of education there which exist, which have not been researched till now for the teacher, faculty, or the professional development in diverse Indian context? And is there something specific? For example, in school education, one can look at the alternative schooling. There are various alternative schooling, experiments which are in place in piecemeal in all throughout India. So, if organizations who are launching the integrated teacher education program are bringing in those changes uh, uh, and making part of their curriculum, are we feeling the need to have researches on these alternative schooling strategies? Okay, so I think these are some of the issues. Um, and I think as scholars, as educators, do we want to be agents of change, or do we want to be the agents of rote compliance? Do we want an evidence-driven transformation, or do we just want to, follow without thinking, and then really feeling sad that we're not achieving the results? So I'm sure I have very strong assertion, philosophical assertion that we as rational beings, as practitioners of education, we are thinking beings, and we want to be agents of change rather than agents of rote compliance. And we, as researchers also, we can have evidence-driven transformation. That would be the biggest the contribution as practitioners of education we can make towards nation building. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your elaborate discussion on the different facets of NEP 2020. And I'm quite optimistic that it must have incited the young minds to think more and debate more. So now is the time to open the floor for discussion. There are certain floor rules which I would like to spell out to all the participants. Whenever somebody wants to speak and finds that somebody else is speaking, we will allow the other person to speak. So it will be kind of self-restraint. Everybody must follow that. And before asking the question, please tell your name and your program and ask the query. And if you have anything, suggestions in any opinion, please present it in a manner that is quite human and civil and does not offend others. Thank you. And now you open the floor for discussion.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Actually, I am a second year IGNOU student. I am still and this year my final year, MA in education. I have doubt, ma'am, actually academic year. So we are doing MA in education. Is it, ma'am, equivalent to MA in higher education? Can we become an
Uh,
educator according to NEP?
I okay.
So I don't think NEP makes a distinction on this or has anything to say on this. However, we have some court judgments which have been filed by those who had amended, and they are seeking equivalency. So I don't think that this is something for me to answer, but you can have a look at those uh, court rulings where whether MA education is equivalent to MEd has been addressed by the rules.
In fact, NEP 2020 spells out the generalities of the policy, but for the
Yes,
specific things, it needs interpretation and needs the intervention of the
yes,
regulatory bodies, further interpreted
yes,
by the courts of law.
yes.
So,
The court has interpreted it to be equivalent, but then you need to look into the details. What was the situation, and for it is for the institutions also to interpret.
Can we, ma'am, actually again we go for MEd who
that is a
completed MA
personal
in
choice. That is a personal choice, but I would advise that whosoever has done MA education must go for an MA, and whosoever have done MA must go for MA education. That is a better idea for the sake of learning and
So
for the sake of
yes,
degree.
even when this kind of situation was not there, MEd is considered a professional qualification like BEd. So one cannot say that BA education is equivalent to BEd, and the emphasis is also very different in both the aspects. So it is again, as Sir said, it is your personal choice. And but he has rightly said that it is advisable if you have an MA education, then go for MEd if possible.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other question?
So, thank you all. I believe that you all have
Your microphone is on.
welcomed what men spelled out, and I believe that we will also further work on that. And while writing your MA education dissertation and thesis, we will also take into care all these things. And I believe
Sir,
that
1 minute, please. Sir,
okay.
1 minute.
There is one question.
Ma'am,
Yes.
after PG, which course is
Hmm.
suitable for us?
For
I
what
think
purpose? What is your ambition?
Ambition, lectureship.
you
Lecturership,
want to
you
go in academics. You want to go for academics or administration or something else.
If you want to lecture on the academics, then you do please.
for lecturership,
Which
you have to go for the exam. The net examination you have to clear. The national eligibility test for lecturership, and also go for the PhD in your area. Right? Does that answer? And I'm sure these kinds of questions can also be addressed by your faculty. They are quite well versed into these aspects.
So thank you
But in
all.
terms of the policy implementation, in terms of the challenges which are faced, if you are also working and facing some kind of challenges, we can discuss those aspects here.
So thank you all. May I now
Thank
request
you.
my colleague Dr. S.K. Panigrai, Additional Director Sir, to kindly offer the formal vote of thanks. Over to you, Panigrai sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'm really tremendously happy, and also I feel proud. I mean, my senior, my friend, my colleague, and my guide. I can tell that because when I started my journey in my second innings, because when I entered to DU, Delhi University, so she is my, you can say she is my guide, she is my senior, she is my friend. So she guided me to build my career, and I got the opportunity to I extend my heartfelt thanks to her. Definitely wherever I am today. So she played a big role in my life. So I must thanks to Dr. Anupam Kochuri because no doubt it's a part and parcel of the professional lives, but built my personal life. Really, she helped me. So I extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Anupam Kochuri ma'am on behalf of my regional center Bhubaneswar, on behalf of my senior Dr. M.K. Das, also on behalf of our Vice Chancellor, Professor Umakant Jilla. Ma'am is out of his busy schedule. He accepted our invitation and also she present very nicely to our learners. Definitely our learners are immensely benefited out of this talks. No doubt we are organizing, series of webinar in our regional center Bhubaneswar. So I really thanks to ma'am. You, really
My pleasure.
give justice to us with your presentation. So once again, I thanks to Professor Anupam ma'am and also
Thank you.
thanks to all my colleagues, Dr. B.C. Nanda, Dr. M.K. Das, Dr. Prabhas Jana. They always support me and support our regional center Bhubaneswar to conduct this kind of program. And last but not least, my dear learners, definitely you are immensely benefited out of this talk because we are just inviting different academicians in our country, not confined to our state. You are calling, all the best institute professor to this webinar series. So I request all of you kindly join and get benefited out of that. Thank you very much once again, ma'am. Thank you, my learners.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you to all the learners. And I really urge that read the original NEP 2020 document, which is on the website, and also the strategies implementation, NEPA implementation strategies document I'll share with you. And best wishes in your academic journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
thank you to the organizers, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Microphone is on.